Today's daf, as you can see on the page, is daf mem zayin. Very, very simple daf over here. Let's just review just what it says in the Mishnah. So if you're in the Mishnah, which the Mishnah appears on daf mem vav amud aleph. Very simple. Shimon, let's say Shimon says to Reuven, Shimon's angry at Reuven, and he says, Oimel lachaveiroi, if he says to his friend Reuven, Kainim lebeischa shani nichnas, I make a neder, your house I'm never going to go into. Ovesotcha, your field shani lekeach, I'll never buy it. If I buy it, I can't benefit from it. So he says it's your house that's the problem. Okay, hold on. Hi, Alan. We're just beginning.
Okay, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. So we're just beginning. We're just reviewing what it says in the Mishnah. Very straightforward daf. The Mishnah said that if a man says to his friend on daf memvav aleph, your house I'm never walking into. So he stressed it's your house that's the problem. So what happens if the guy died or sold the house to somebody else, mutter, then he's permitted. It's not his house anymore. So if Shimon said to Reuven, I hate you and I'm not entering your house, then if Reuven sold his house to somebody else, Shimon is permitted to enter into it. Now, what would you say to this? If the house burned down and Reuven rebuilt his house, so it's not the same house he made the neder, but still, it's the house on the property. So therefore, in that case, it's still Reuven's house. And Shimon said a neder, I'm never walking into your house. So even if it burned down, he's not permitted to go into that house.
Well, what if he owned two houses?
Well, he said to this, let's say, right, could be. But he said this particular house I'm not going into. So if he sold it to somebody else, of course, it's mutter. But if the house burned down and he just rebuilt the new house, it's still his house, so he's not permitted to go into. But look at this case. Oh, here he says, I'm never walking into this house, not your house, but this house. So then if the guy sold it to somebody else, it's usher. Because what did Shimon say? He wasn't particularly mad at Reuven. He just said, this house I'm never walking into. I think it's haunted. So I make a neder, this house I'm never walking into. So even if Reuven sold it to somebody else, Shimon, who made a neder, can never walk into that house. He said, after the house. But, very important, if this house burned down and then Reuven built it up again, in that case, he'd be permitted to walk into because it's not this house. It's a different house. So that's a very important point. So, okay. So now, let's go back to the height. Well, Louis, we're just beginning. Daf mem zayin amud aleph. Okay. So now we learned like this. If a man made the neder, he could assur himself by a zeh or this house, right? We learned that way. I could assur myself anything, right? Forever. I could assur a restaurant forever. I'm never walking in there. That's fine. A madir. We learned what a madir is. Reuven says to Shimon, you are usher to my house. So Shimon didn't make the neder. Reuven made a neder, forcing Shimon into a neder. He said that my house should be usher to you. But so does Reuven have the right to usher that house even if Reuven would sell it, subsequently sell it? Because since he is doing it on behalf of somebody else, he could only do it as long as he owns the house, but not if he sells it to somebody else. So let's read the Gemara. Okay, Boya Avimi. Avimi asked a question. I make you usher on this house. Okay, he didn't say my house. He said this house. So then, mace, if the guy died, or he sold it to somebody else. So now, what's the din with the mudar? So let's call our case, Reuven says to Shimon, my house, this house should be forever usher to you. Now, right now, it belongs to Reuven. So Reuven says, this house should be usher to you. Is it usher forever on Shimon? If Reuven would sell the house, would it be usher on Shimon? Our Mishnah is not a proof. because our Mishnah is talking about the man himself made the neder. But if somebody here, we're talking about somebody, the mother made the neder. The owner of the house forced the neder onto the mudar, onto the vawi. So is the house also forever if he would sell it to somebody else? So the Gemara says, what's the question? Can somebody ask something that's in his possession? Right now, it's Reuven's house, but can he ask it so that it will take effect onto somebody else, even after it's long not in his possession, or not? So Amar Rava said, we have this a very simple case. Tashma, come in here. Ha'omer livnoi. A man says to his son, right? Now, a man says to his son, he's the man is the mader. The son is the mudar, right? He says to his son, he hates his son, right? It happens. He says, I'll never let you have any hana for my possessions. Okay? What happens, Umeis? Then he died. So he made his son usher on his possessions, but he died, so it's not his possessions anymore. Yerushana, then the son could easily inherit those possessions. B'chayav u'v'moisai, when he's alive, and he says, not only are you, Mr. Son, are you usher on my possessions while I'm alive, but he says you're usher to my possession even after I die. So he said it beferish. So it's his possession. He's ushering his son long after he doesn't own the possessions. It means even after he dies. So Mace, when he dies, lo Yerushana, the son can't inherit it. Doesn't mean he doesn't inherit it. He just means he can't benefit from it. So we see that a man, shmami no, we see from a proof positive. Adam oiser dava shibersusai. A man can ask something that he owns that long after he doesn't own it anymore. When he leaves, when he's not his, when he's not the owner.
He cannot answer.
Other pipes.
But he can answer somebody else. He's answering his son. He says, "My son, even after I die, you can't have a nura for my nechosim, my possessions, my Megan." So yes, he could do it. Adam Oisa Davan Shebersusa, you could take something that's in your possession and ask something on somebody else long after it's not your possession anymore. So therefore, if Reuven will tell Shimon, this house should be forever usher to you, even if you would sell it to somebody else, it would still be usher. So that's very clear, that part of the Mishnah. Now that we established a new thing, how far do we extend that? Listen to this Mishnah. Tanan Hasan, we learned over there. A man says, these fruits should be usher to me forever. Okay? Well, a person could say that. It's usher from my mouth or to my mouth. No matter what he said, the pears are now usher to him, right? He can't eat the pears. But the barista says, what happens if, let's say it's apples, okay? He says, these apples are also for me forever. And then he switches the apples for oranges. So the Mishnah says, also b'chilufeya. He's also in the barter. If he exchanged it for something else, he's also in those oranges too. Uvi giduleim. Giduleim is more simpler. What happens, he took the apples that he asered, planted it into the ground, and new apples grew out. An apple tree grew out. So then he's usher on those growths if he planted it. But the question is, if he bartered it, he exchanged it for oranges, why is he usher on the oranges? So one could say that the reason why he's usher on the oranges is because when he said the fruits, he means any benefit from these fruits. So it's not only the apples that are usher to him. If he would go over to his friend and say, take my apples, give me your oranges, since he's benefiting by exchanging the apples to oranges, he's usher. That's pashut what you would learn. But or you can mean no. Maybe he meant that only these apples are usher, not only these apples and only these apples also. But Rabbanan made a gezerah, made strictness on him that even though you didn't mean only usher the apples, we don't want you to start getting around isurim. And the apples always remain usher for you. Don't try to work around the system. It's a chumrah d'Rabbanan that you should not barter the apples because it looks like you're benefiting from the apples. Fine. Even though you didn't mean to, you said only these apples, but still the Rabbanan said it's also b'chilufein. Fine. So that's when a person says it on himself. Now, Rami Bachama would ask a question. Now, let me explain. Rami Bachama, let's take any Isser Bahanoah. Not necessarily you make a neder. Let's say I cook basar b'chalav. If you cook milk and meat, you have a nice steak and you put it into and cook it with milk, so that meat becomes asur b'hanoah. You can't benefit from it. So what would be the halacha is, can I give it to my housekeeper, Gorsha housekeeper, and she gives me some money for it or something like that. I'm exchanging something for it. She'll give me fruits for it. Is it asur or not? So would the Rabbanan make a chumrah also by this also? Okay, that's the question. Would the Rabbanan say, oh, it's asur b'hanoah, basar b'chalav is asur b'hanoah, you can't go give it to your housekeeper and she gives you something back in exchange, and now you could benefit. Or is not asur b'hanoah, because could be this was only limited to Nedarim, because that's what you meant. So Rami Bachama had this question by Nedarim. Omar, a person said, Koinim peres ho'elu al ploini, mahu b'chilufehem. He said, these fruits should be asur on somebody else. So now he added al ploini. So the Mishnah only said, if you say it to yourself, it's asur b'chilufehem. What about if you're asuring somebody else? What would the din be the barter situation? Me, I'm reading, do we say, Gabi delay, when it comes to yourself, when you say these fruits are asur to me, so I understand why you're asur on the barter. Since a person can asur his friend's fruit on himself, I can go over to your house, and say all your fruits in your kitchen are asur to me. That's clear. So therefore, because I can do that, so therefore I am permitted to, since I can do that, so then the barter situation makes sense. Since I can do that, so I can asur the barter. In other words, since I can asur somebody else's fruits, right, on myself, so I can asur, even though it's not my fruits, I could say to these fruits and say, these fruits are asur, even if I'm going to exchange it to something else. Even if I eventually barter this apples to oranges, that's why I could asur. That's why if you do barter, if you do change the apples to oranges, it becomes asur. Because that only is if you're the one making the neder. But if I'm making the neder to asur somebody else, gabe chaberoi, when it comes to somebody else, right? So it's not that I'm making the neder. It's I'm making the neder to asur my friend. Since the ein adam oisa peres chaberoi al chaberoi, I can't asur my friend's fruit. Oh, I'm having trouble. I can't asur something that didn't come to this world on my friend. It's something that's, if I can't asur something that, here we go. I can't asur something that's not in this world on my friend. I can only asur what I own on my friend. I could say to my friend, my fruits are asur to you because I own these fruits and I have a right to asur you. But we go to Amud Beis. But I wouldn't be able to asur something that's not my fruits on you, because there are two problems with that. One, it's not my fruits. And two, it's not even here yet. It's not even in the world yet. So therefore, it's like a barter that didn't happen yet. So therefore, of course, it doesn't work. Oidilma, or maybe the Chachamim went and said that even in this case, you're allowed to be doing this. Mishum dechilufin ki gedulim dami. Because when you barter something, it's like it's like it grew out of the ground. Just like when something grows out of the ground. Let's say a fruit. I ask a fruit on myself, and then I plant the fruit. Certainly, I can't benefit from the fruit. If I ask a fruit on my friend and I plant it in the ground, it's the same fruit, so he can't benefit from that. So if I would barter that fruit and exchange it for a different fruit, there would still be us under him. It doesn't matter him or his friend. You see, when it comes to answering your friend, you have to understand, I can't answer something that doesn't belong to me. Everybody would agree to me. Let's say my shul is shari. I don't own shari. And I could say, you are not permitted to go into shari. Can I do that to somebody else? No, because it's not mine, right? So when I answer my fruit on my friend, I can't answer the eventual exchange of that fruit. If I exchange that fruit out from apples to oranges, when I made the neder, those oranges weren't my oranges. It could become my oranges if I exchanged the fruit, but when I made the neder, it was only on those apples that are in my possession. So the Gemara in one part of the shaila is, since it's not exchanged yet, I have no right to ask somebody else. Or maybe Chachamim said it's always usher. It's always going to be usher, because at the end of the day, the benefit of exchanging to get the oranges, I have to exchange the apples. So it doesn't make a difference if I made the neder to answer the apples on myself or I answer the apples on somebody else. If I exchange it to oranges, he would still be usher to use the oranges. So Tashma come in here, very simple, 2 Tashmas, and that's the end. Tashma come in here. A man says to his wife. Now his wife, you're always obligated to give food to your wife. You have to, that's part of the ksuba, but not when you're engaged to her. So a man answered his wife when he was engaged to her. He said to his wife, when we're engaged, I answer you from benefiting from my possessions. Then he gets married to her. Now he becomes obligated to support his wife, but she has this neder. She cannot benefit from his possessions. So how is she going to benefit? How is she going to have food? So the Brisa says, loiva, she borrows from somebody else. And here the key word is loiva. She borrows from somebody else, obligating her husband to pay the loan. In other words, she uses the credit card and obligates the husband to pay the loan. And the one who she borrowed from can come collect from the husband. Now let's think about what's happening over here. The husband's possessions really are supposed to pay for that food, and the food is supposed to be exchanged for that food, and that food is supposed to be given to the woman. So what you see from here is that although the food is given to the woman, and why did the guy give the food to the woman? Because he's getting the husband's possessions, so the husband's paying for it after he gives over the food. So therefore, basically, the husband's possessions is being exchanged for food, which is subsequently given to the woman. So we see that you could do such a thing. So even though because the neder was only on his possessions, not what was exchanged for that possession. So now question also. If a man says to his friend, these apples that are in front of me are usher to you. You can't benefit from these apples. If he would subsequently exchange the apples for oranges, then the person who he answered would be permitted on the oranges, just like in this case the woman is permitted to eat the food, even though the husband's possessions are usher, and nevertheless, he's paying for that food, and it was exchanged for that food. My timer, don't we see that we see the husband has to pay back, and it's okay, and there's no violation of the neder, lav mishrum, because the chalufin, exchanging lav gedulin dami, is not as severe as the growth. In other words, chilupin, if it's an exchange, it's not considered as if it grew out of the ground, and therefore this is permitted to be done. Amar Rava, so Rava said, no, it's a very big difference, because here, let's take my case again. I asked my friend on my apples, right? So these apples are in front of me. If I exchange it for oranges, I make the exchange right in front of right then and there. So then I could say the oranges become usher to my friend. I made an exchange. But here, what happened first? First, the woman took the food. And so now she ate the food already. So now she just has an obligation loan. Then the husband comes and pays for that food by paying back the loan. So that's not like a fair barter. That barter happened after ex post facto she did the exchange. It's almost like if you eat the oranges and then you exchange it for the apples. So here she ate the food, and now you're exchanging the food that she ate for the husband's money. So then that is permitted. That's not the normal exchange that we're talking about over here. When you're exchanging, let's say in my case, apples with the oranges, we say then the issa still remains, and you can't eat the oranges. But here, the other, if you did exchange it, if it happened first, she first took the food, and now for the food that she took, you want to barter that food, that should be exchanged for the husband's possessions as he pays the choy, that could be permitted, but that really doesn't answer our question. Ella, says the Gemara, let's try to answer it, and this is the last thing we're learning. Again, the question is, I have a basket of apples in front of me. I said to my friend, you're not allowed to eat these apples. And what happens? I go ahead and exchange the apples for oranges. Now, would that oranges now become usher on my friend? Say if I planted the apples, for sure it becomes usher because those apples grew into new apples, but the real apples that ushered still remains there in the ground. The question is, if I bartered that apples for oranges, would my friend become usher on that? So really, I'm just pointing out that, as I explained, this could be by any isser hana, anything that you're not allowed to have hana. For example, basar b'chalav. Right? We gave the example of basar b'chalav. Can I give the basar b'chalav to my housekeeper and she exchanges it out for me for something else? She gives me money for it or something, or something like that. She gives me apples for it. Or orla. Orla is a type of fruit that in the first 3 years that you picked it, you're not allowed to benefit from that fruit. So that is also a type of Isser Hana. What happens if you barter that orla? Is it permitted? So the Mishnah says that Toshma, come in here. Hamakadesh ba'orla. A guy has, let's say, fruits. He has a tree that just began. It just less than a 3-year-old tree, and it gave off little fruits. And he gives to a woman. And he says, "Here's your kedushin money." Does it work? Well, those fruits to him are asur b'hana. So therefore, if he goes to a girl and says, "Here's your kedushin," einu mekudeshes. It's not mekudeshes. But what happens? Mecharon. If he sold the fruits, he wasn't supposed to sell the fruits because you're not allowed to sell the fruits because they're asur b'hana. But he took it and sold it and exchanged it for money. Now he has money in his hands. The kiddush b'dmeyan, and took the money as mekadesh the woman. So basically, he bartered the fruits for the money. And yet he took the money, and now he's mekadesh the woman. Harezu mukudasha. She's now betrothed. So what do we see from there? That bartering is good. So what the Gemara wants to say is that the bartering is not the same as the Isser Hana. So same thing. If I asked my apples on my friend Isser Hana, if I exchange it for oranges, he's permitted to benefit from those oranges. Answers the Gemara Hachinami. And this is it's not really hachinami the same, but basically it's saying like this. Think about what happened by the woman. A man had olive fruit, right? And which is also b'hana. He exchanged it for the money. So he made one barter. But here he's making a double barter. He took the money and exchanged it for the woman. Because basically when you're mekadesh a woman, she's selling herself to the husband in exchange for that money. So it's a double barter over there. So therefore, over there by the Kedushin, that case it works because it's a double barter. But over here, if I just have a derivative, in other words, I'm taking the apples and exchanging it for the orange, who says the oranges would be mutter? It may be that in the first derivative it's usher. It's only in the second derivative it's permitted, where you exchange the orla for money. You exchange the money for the woman. So that's why it's mukudashes. That's why it says if it's a first derivative, you can't do it. The avid, but if you did it already and made a barter of it, it can work. And that's why it's no proof over there. Ain't economic. So this is the Gemara leaves this unresolved. What's the question? Question is simple. Man has apples in front. He assered apples on his friend. Now, I want to say, if he assered it on himself, so then always it's usher. He can't barter it and say, oh, I'm going to exchange these apples for oranges. Now I can eat it. No, if you made the neder, you're forever usher on it, even if you barter it out. But if I'm ushering my friend, that's the question. Do I have a right to usher something davar shalai bala olam, which means I didn't barter it yet, so I can't usher my friend on it because it's now a double negative. It's something, it's ushering on my friend, not myself, and it's something that's loy bala olam. I didn't barter it yet. So the Gemara's question is, would your friend be usher if you happen to have bartered it from apples to oranges? And the Gemara leaves that unresolved. Okay.
Sure.